Welcome back to the basement. On this episode, we are going to finish up work on this Ibanez Talman TMB 100 by replacing all of the stock electronics. Okay, so long story short, this is my second attempt at doing an intro for this video. I didn't like the first one because I was rambling, and I'm already starting off that way. But bottom line is this particular episode and this particular part of this project is completely unnecessary. So I'm going to repeat that. This is completely unnecessary. In fact, all of this work up to this point has been completely unnecessary. All the work so far has been aesthetics. Yes, I did add a high mass bridge. I did replace a pick guard that was falling apart. So all that's good. And of course I shielded everything. I made a bone nut and did the lumen lay slide dot inlays, and of course the block inlay, the pearl block inlays on the fretboard. So none of that, with the exception of the really good setup, the bone nut, and shielding the electronics cavity, really made much of a difference. I didn't notice much of a difference in tone or sustain or anything by adding the hip shot kick-ass bridge. It did help with the balance ever so slightly, not much. Not enough to say, hey, you should go do that if you feel like you've got neck dive on your TMB 100. I don't feel like it's all for that. So anyway, the pickups and the preamp did not sound bad. In fact, I kind of liked it. It sounded pretty good. It was a little bit dark, a little bit muddy, so I decided, you know what, I've got some noise in my signal chain, which I attributed to this bass, because when I would plug in a different bass, it wouldn't be as bad. And it turns out I've got an issue with my pedal board. I've got a bad patch cable that's grounding out somewhere and causing static. I thought it was the bass because when I switched out to other basses, like I said, it wasn't as bad. And whenever I would put my hand on the bridge or the strings, the noise level would go down. So I figured I had a grounding issue with the bass. That wasn't the case. So I replaced the preamp with a passive system, all brand new components. That didn't fix the problem. So I replaced the pickups. That didn't fix the problem. And then just unplugging it a couple times, kicking the pedal board around, that fixed the problem. So I've either got a bad pedal or I've got a bad patch cable somewhere in my signal chain on my pedal board. But at the end of the day, it was a good excuse to buy a whole bunch of expensive parts to throw in this cheap bass. Now I've got something that's, well, it's pretty awesome. I love what this thing is turned into. So let's dive into what it is that we did. All right, so I think the cosmetics are buttoned up on this bass, and it's probably time to dive into what's actually the most important part of this, and that's making it sound great. So before we replace the pickups, which is arguably the most expensive piece that we could possibly do, again, this is supposed to be a cheap bass, and already I feel like we've probably doubled or tripled the cost of what I paid for this bass just in the modifications we've done so far. Between shielding the electronics cavity, adding the hip shot kick-ass bridge, obviously the mother of pearl block inlays, the custom bone nut, and then lumen lay side dot inlays, I think we've dropped a ton of labor into this bass and not a ton of cost. So far the most expensive component we've added is the high mass bridge, which was about 60 bucks. So again, there's not a ton of money invested in this. I think overall I've got about $100 in parts on this thing, in addition to the $100 that I paid for it. This thing lists for $199 brand new at most music retailers. So I think we've achieved a bass that's worth more than $200 if you factor in cost of labor. So I reached out to my friends at 920D Customs, so shout out to Ricky and Jimmy, and they sent me out this kit. This is actually a pretty cool kit. So I don't know if you guys have seen like a 62 Fender Jazz bass, like kind of like the Flea Signature model, that really cool pink one, the seashell pink, I think is what the color is called. But anyway, that bass has a set of stacked knobs, just like this one does. So it's volume, tone. And that's essentially what I got from 920D Customs. I've got this gorgeous piece of kit. So this has a pure tone jack, CTS pots. These are concentric pots, 250K and 500K. And then we've got the series parallel toggle switch, the mini toggle, and then these beautiful knobs. And what I feel like about these knobs, obviously, is the two-tone, which again, black and white bass, you got black and white stacked knobs. I think that's cool. The only thing I don't like about these pots is they don't have the center detent. So you don't necessarily know right where you're at. Now, obviously the challenge we're gonna have here, in addition to the size, is where to mount this mini toggle. If I could do anything I wanted, I would probably put it right about there on the jack plate. It'd probably be easier to push it right up here, which might be what I end up doing. We'll just have to see. So I'm interested to see how much extra slack we have on the wiring. If not, I've got the same manufacturer that makes the wiring that 920D Customs use, and they use that cool orange color. I ordered some of that as well in a different set of color. So that's the vintage style, same gauge, and it's the fabric pushback shielding or sheathing. So anyway, let's bust this thing apart and see what we're looking at. Okay, so everything's apart. Now I can start lifting this off. Again, any feedback on my shielding job, I'm definitely open to it. So where I think I'm going to have a clearance issue is going to be for this this rear knob. So what I'm going to be taking out is going to be this preamp. And I actually also, because I was afraid there might be some other things contacting here, I went ahead and put electrical tape over these mini pots, just for good measure. Don't know if that helped or anything, but I noticed when I touched them, they didn't feel like they were properly grounded. But I know this thing is grounded through the bridge, and it's grounded very, very well. So I don't know again, I don't know what's causing the problem. Alright, so I didn't realize my camera was not focused, but I took the 9-volt battery out. So here's the whole wiring harness. It's all gone. So I soldered it all back the way that it was so I wouldn't lose track of that. So that's all done. So I know I'm going to need a ground wire. So I'm going to use some of this new cloth insulated wire. Bad news is I'm gonna have to drill out this jack plate. So what that means for me is once I do that, I don't know how easily I'll be able to go back to the old. I should be able to do it. This is a really thick piece of metal though. All right, so I'm gonna go and figure out a good way to see if I got a step bit. See how much I need to open this up. I'm really disappointed that I have to open it up at all. Doesn't look like it has to go much, but it's enough. So I'll be right back. Well, that was fairly easy. All right, let's poke a possibly unneeded hole in this new pick guard. All right, I'm definitely getting sidetracked with things that potentially don't matter. I'm replacing this ground wire that went to the shielding that was underneath. So let's see here. So yes, at this point, I've invested so much time and labor in this that I'm not gonna cheap out on the pickups since we've come this far already. So hopefully I don't need to replace the pickups. I want to see what this thing sounds like just replacing the active preamp with this this passive setup, and if I like it, then I'll just leave it like that. If I don't, then the pickups are going to go. And the main thing I'm trying to do is solve for the noise. I think between all the pedals, effects, and preamps I have at my disposal, I'll be able to getting a sound out of this thing that I like is probably not going to be an issue. All right, so let's figure out how to wire this puppy. Okay, so I don't think I got this right. So all I'm getting when I do a tap test with a screwdriver is the bridge pickup or the neck pickup in this position with the toggle. When I flip the switch, it doesn't do anything. I'm not getting anything on the bridge pickup. So I'm going to try one other thing. I'm just going to try reversing the positive and negative leads on the pickups and see if I just got that backwards. Maybe I got the labeling wrong. And if that's the case, problem solved. If not, then I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and do some more research. All right, so that didn't work. I'm getting, still getting a signal on the P pickup. I turned up the volume on the amp just to see if I was getting anything. I could kind of faintly hear on both tests something in the bridge position. I am getting something on the bridge position. This is very, very low output compared to the neck pickup. And again, it only works in one position on the toggle switch. So I'm gonna do some research. It's almost 1 o'clock tonight in the morning, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it for right now, do a little bit of research and come back at it and figure out the wiring tomorrow night, I suppose. And then throw some strings on it, give it a test. I think there might be some fret leveling that needs to get done. I feel like this may have moved a little bit, but I'll address that a little bit later. But anyway, let's figure out the wiring first. All right, it's like day 692. I'm working on this cheap bass. I think I figured out what the problem is. I can't read a wiring schematic. Let's get after this. Okay, so good news is I figured out the problem. I just had one of the leads soldered backwards. I had one of them grounded to the outside of the tone pot that I didn't need to have it done. I needed to actually have it go to a terminal. So I just crossed one of the wires on the wiring diagram. No big deal. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and button this thing up, slap some strings back on it, and just give it a rip for a few weeks and see what I think of it. If it's too noisy, obviously I won't gig with it, but yeah, I'm gonna give it some thought as far as what pickups I want to throw in this. I don't want to go super expensive, but I also don't want to go super cheap either. I think at minimum I want to go something with individual magnets rather than like a ceramic bar magnet in the back. So maybe just some basic run-of-the-mill Alnico 5 single coil pickups for the bridge, and then obviously a P pickup for the neck. But anyway, let's put this thing back together and play around with it for a little while. Okay, so on these little indents here on the knobs, the bottom ring, I'm gonna try this glow on. This is glow in the dark gun sight paint. I've had this for years. It's definitely very, very blue when it's not glowing, which is different than the lumen lay side dots. So that's gonna be a little bit of a difference. But I think this will do the job just fine. So I'm just gonna use, this is like really thick. I've had this for years, so this is pretty much dried up, which is not a good thing. So even though this is pretty much dry, I think I can still work a fair amount of this into that hole. This is completely unneeded. I just want to see if this is a viable, cheap alternative to the lumen lay. I think it will be. This is, I can do the same thing with the top knobs. All I need to do is just drill a tiny indent into it, and then I can do the exact same thing if I feel like it's needed. Super subtle. All right, let me string this sucker up again, and I'm gonna just play it the rest of the night. Okay, so let me set up the tone demo and what we're gonna do with that. So initially what I did was I did a full take of sound tests with the wiring harness from 920D Customs with the stock pickups in it. Then I attempted to run back through the same settings by memory with the Seymour Duncan quarter pounder pickup set that's in it now. I don't think I did a very good job of capturing all the same settings, so there may be some settings you don't get a side-by-side comparison on, but I will do the best that I can. All right, first up is series. This is going to be wide open, 100% volume, 100% tone, both pickups. All right, tone all the way off. All right, now I'm going to switch to parallel mode, and I'm going to go 100% on volume and tone both pickups. All right, here's just the P-bass pickup. All right, here is just the jazz pickup in the bridge position, tone all the way up. All right, I just want to switch between series and parallel real quick. Volume up on both pickups, tone all the way up on both pickups. That was parallel, here's series. So it's a little warmer, a little rounder in series mode versus parallel. It's a little brighter in parallel mode. And you have obviously independent volume and tone controls over both pickups in that mode. So I kind of like it. The versatility is really, really cool. It's kind of like just an instant toggle switch to roll off your tone to just the right amount. So I kind of dig that. All right, so how would I summarize this particular project now that it's done? Well, all I intended to do was buy a $100 bass and see how cool it was, or not, and use it as a test bed platform to learn a couple of new skills on, refine some that I had, and just learn kind of guitar setup and maintenance, and try some new things with. And this quickly spiraled out of control. But the only thing I haven't done to this thing is repaint it, which I'm not gonna. So I really, really do dig this bass. It's a chunky body. It's a little, it's a little, I don't know, a little wide in the hips, but I still like it. This is I love the look, the color scheme that's on it now, especially with the block inlays and the black pick guard. So from an aesthetic standpoint, this is almost like the Jaguar I always would have wanted. Now, I think the spending got a little out of hand on this particular project. I think you'll agree. Between the wiring harness, which fortunately, shout out to 920D Customs because they did supply me with the wiring harness. I did buy the pickups, I did buy the bridge. The bridge was left over from a project I didn't use it on, so it wasn't a new investment. The block inlays were cheap. The lumen lay side dots relatively were cheap, even though I really complained about them. The bone nut blank was cheap. and the pick guard was like 20 bucks. So all in, had I paid full price for everything, I probably have got, let's see here, 150 for the pickups. The wiring harness without the control plate would have been about 110. So we're looking at 260. Then the bridge would have made it about 320. Block inlays would make it about 340. Bone nut, let's just call it $5, so 345. Then the lumen lay side dots was 20. So it's about 365, 385. So about 385 bucks in parts for a $100 base. So this is a $500 base now, essentially. And that's not factoring any labor costs. So would I do this again? I think to gain the experience, I think it was helpful. Honestly, I really think it was helpful. I learned quite a bit and I had a lot of fun doing it, and that's kind of the whole point. And now I have another base that I'm really, really in love with, that I want to pick up every time I walk by it, which makes it difficult because I love my other bases. So now it's kind of like a shootout between this and my jazz bass that I invested a similar amount of effort and labor into. And oddly enough, it started at the same cost of $100. So I don't know, it's giving it a run for its money for my number 1 4-string. But anyway, I really appreciate everybody for watching and the feedback that you've given. You know, the tips that I get along the way. This is part of the reason why I do this. It's not because I think I know what I'm doing. It's because I want to save somebody. If I make a mistake, I want to publish it, and I want to save somebody else from making that mistake potentially. And the audience that I have seems to, as small as it is, there's some talented individuals that know what they're doing and are not afraid to share that with me, and I appreciate that. So that's the most fun part for me, is learning from you guys that are watching this and giving me feedback and comments and reaching out to me in other ways. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time down here in the basement.